Welcome to the Multifaceted Executive, the podcast where leadership meets diversity, innovation, and impact. We go beyond boardrooms and titles to bring you powerful stories and insights from executives of all backgrounds. Get ready to challenge conventional thinking, gain fresh perspectives, and discover the leadership lessons you won't hear anywhere else. I'm your host, Amanda Cosme-Reddie, founder and CEO of the Multifaceted Executive and Take Brand Consulting. Let's get started. Welcome back. I'm your host, Amanda Cosme-Reddie, founder and CEO for the Multifaceted Executive and Take Brand Consulting. Joining me today is a special guest. His name is Deepak Wanner, whom I've worked with in the past and is another great example of a multifaceted executive. For those that are here for the first time, a multifaceted executive is a leader that has many facets. They're not defined by a single industry, background, or leadership style, but rather their ability to adapt, inspire, and create impact. Deepak is a serial entrepreneur, former tech executive, and a leader who has built high-performing teams across industries. His leadership mantra is simple: good people make great teams. Today, you'll hear why this phrase has carried him through exits and industry pivots. So let's jump in. Deepak, I invite you to further introduce yourself and what's led to who you've become today.
Amanda, let me just start by saying it's a pleasure to be here talking with you again. Amanda and I worked together in a previous venture, Merchant Link, and it was so much fun. Amanda is, as you can tell, somebody who's got like a spark about her. She clearly differentiates herself, and I liked working with her in the past, and I'm so glad we're still friends today. All right, well, so let me start about my past. I come from an immigrant background. It was really interesting because an immigrant background actually kind of says, you will succeed. There is no question about it. There's a lot of comedy shows about how hard parents drive their kids. But you know what's interesting? When I was just I grew up in Canada, and I still am in Canada, by the way, and I was just in grade 8. I remember parents had laid out my future already. So it was actually kind of interesting talking to my teacher, my guidance counselor in grade 8, saying, do you want to look at what it takes to be a fireman or whatever? No, I've already got it laid out. I'm going to University of Waterloo, electrical engineering. Following that, I'm taking an MBA, and then I will be starting my own company. It's like way ahead of the game. But you know what's the best part is I didn't know what else to do. So I just followed the path my parents laid ahead of me, and it was wonderful. You know, a lot of people actually say, well, did you really always want to do it? And the answer is no, I grew into that task. And as you grow and you start to meet people, there's always the question, what is more important, luck or your hard work? And that is kind of interesting because I was very lucky. I was lucky that I had the parents that I had. I was lucky that I was in the position where all the opportunities sort of showed up. Once you actually see the opportunity, it's your responsibility to do the hard work to actually build it. And most of the time, a motto that I used to always say is, if it was easy, it would already be done. Take the tough tasks. Take the tasks that look like they're challenging and believe in yourself. And it doesn't always work. But when it does, and the task is challenging, it can be wildly successful. And that's sort of the path.
I love that. And I really enjoy that you embrace the value that your parents brought to you at a young age. Following the path that your parents want for you is not everybody's cup of tea, right? There's people that will veer off. And we do traditionally see this more in underrepresented backgrounds because there is a sense of, we got here, so now I really want you to make something of yourself. And we become limited when it comes to, oh, get creative, go be an entrepreneur, go follow your dreams, right? We see it in a lot of movies and it's been this stereotypical thing. But I love that you found the value in what your parents had shared with you at a young age and really carried you through. And you've led in some high pressure environments. What values have kept you grounded through it all?
Yeah, that's a good question because when it comes down to it, nothing's a perfect success story. Everything goes through failure. And so you sort of have to balance, being an entrepreneur, people always say, oh, you take huge risks. The answer is you don't. An entrepreneur is really about a person who takes calculated risks. They look at their situation and they go, is there a chance that I will fail? Yes. But what's the chance of success? And if you could, my number was roughly 70%. If I could take something which is 70% or greater, and of course, on an engineering model, which is what I was, trained in, you list the factors of success, you list the factors of fail, you put a weighting factor to it, and you say, 70%, I can make this. Okay, let's do it. And then the next big part is to motivate your team. You have to actually become the cheerleader, sit back and say to each one, because each one brings a different skill set to the table. And you have to say, I believe that you can do this. I believe you can do that. Sometimes they'll say, we can't do this. And you have to say, you know what, let's try. And you promote the idea that there's a success along the path. And often you surprise even yourself when you actually do it. We talked about some of the jobs I did. Probably one of the most interesting ones was I worked on a passport reader design. And this is like a wild story. So the reason I did my first venture, I was working there in Nortel, Northern Telecom, which was like this telecommunications giant. And I thought it was time for me to move on because my dad had said, start your own company. And this was an opportunity. The first company I started was a company called IBEX. And it was really more or less management consulting for the government because I live in Ottawa and I still do. And I was working on it and I get a call from this guy that went to school with me. He was working at this big bank, Bank of Montreal, and they were trying to roll out this online machine debit model with an IBM cash register. He calls me up and he goes, I am tasked with making this thing work, and I got no clue what I'm doing. You were my lab partner. You were really smart. You know you could do it. And I said, well, send me the specs. And he sent me the spec document. I go, oh, you can do this. And then Bill's boss called me back and he goes, I hear you're going to build this for us. What? and so what happened was I looked at it and go, I could build it. So I knew that it's going to take me like 9 months, maybe even a year to do it. I was trying to start this other startup, but what I did was I did that during the day. And at night, I actually literally stapled a sleeping bag on all my windows so I couldn't tell if it was day or night. I sent the prototype to them and they said, they're going to pay me $10,000 for it. And they did. They paid me $10,000. And then nothing happened after that until about maybe 6 months later. They said, we want 10 more.
Wow.
Designs of the plants. That's how I'll build them. And I said, I get 10,000 each for them. He goes, no, you get 2,000 each. 6 months after that, I got another call from them and they said, come down here. We want to talk to you. When I showed up, the guy goes, I want to know, first of all, you're not working out of your basement. And now I was working in a 4-story on an apartment building. He goes, okay, I want 2,000. And that was the beginning of my first company. Anyway, all these machinations going to the point where somewhere along the line, I had to put together a team to really build it. That's when you start to hunt for all the people in your past. And you sort of say, that guy, Craig, he is the best operations guy I've ever worked with. Bring him on board. That guy is the best designer I've ever worked with. Bring him on board. Once the money is there and you got the commitment from all those guys, they just sort of just exploded. And we ended up probably that company, I was told by Visa that 1/3 of all the payment transactions in Canada at one time were flowing through all our devices. So that was a big success.
That is huge. I really appreciate you sharing because it's clear that you had an entrepreneurial mindset from earlier on, and it allowed you to then create a business that then took off. You didn't even realize it was going to evolve into this larger scale project, but because of the calculated risk and the expertise that you bring, they tapped into you and they said, hey, I really need you to help me build this. I love that you jumped in and you did it.
Yeah. And product companies are amazing because what they do is management consulting means that if you go away, run a vacation, your income stops.
Yeah.
But products, they keep going.
Yeah. And thank you earlier for all of the kind comments you gave in reference to working with me in the past. I really enjoyed working with you and your team, and I could definitely tell that they were empowered by you as a leader. And I felt that empowerment because when Merchant Link acquired Presidia, at first I was like, okay, this is going to be a lot of change. I don't know what to expect, but I embraced it. That's when I was able to take a trip out to Ottawa and visit you and your team and get hands on. And that can be hard for people that are not necessarily technical people, right? To be in this room with all of these highly skilled engineers and trying to get into the nitty gritty of what is going on and how does it help create this broader strategy. I was eager to learn, and it was partly because of the team that you had built. No one treated me like, you don't know what you're doing, or like, why are you here? They were excited to have someone new, even if I wasn't super technical. And I gained a lot of the technical skills that I had early in my career because of the team that you had built and worked with. So thank you too for helping with my development and realizing that I had a lot of potential and my own value and experience to offer. Maybe not so much in a technical perspective, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, one of my philosophies is when I have a team, give them a lot of rope. What happens is that if you give them all the rope that they can handle and they come back and they prove it to you, they can change the course of your company. That's what we found with you, Amanda. I remember some of the guys were saying, well, Amanda seems bright. And I said, give her more. Give her as much as she wants. You were asking the right questions. You were saying, how does this work? And after a while, no one actually wants to see you fail. They all want to see you succeed. So they kept feeding it to you. And they would come back and say, hey, Amanda's pretty good. She's definitely the brightest. So as soon as you ask the question, it would always go to you and answer it. Yeah, we love
Yeah,
that.
you and I both know it wasn't like that with everybody, right? There were also leaders that didn't support the questions I was asking or the problems that I was bringing to the table and trying to actually see a way through. I think it's important that when we are passionate about something and we know we can add value and make a difference, we need to push forward and we need to do that regardless of the optics and maybe what other people believe about us. That's why one of my favorite quotes is that you will be too much for some people. Those are not your people. You experience it too, right? It was almost like we both got into somebody's way in the process.
Biggest mistake about corporations is bureaucracy. And the biggest weapon bureaucracy has is it's stay in your own swim lane. You hear that way too often. And the answer really is that's because people are threatened. And sometimes that's not a bad thing to threaten someone back. But that's corporations, and that's basically what they call politics. And you have to learn how to navigate politics. There's different techniques that I've learned and find the weapon, which is their person in the company that's the decision maker. In my case, that was Dan Lane, the president, and he was amazing. Probably one of the best guys I've ever worked with. He's the kind of guy that had the high EQ, the intelligence to actually understand this person, understand that person, what it takes to actually make them work together. So much like I am a leader of my team, the next up has to be the leader of you guys to be able to take that swim lane and break them down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we worked in a very wonderful company. I mean, it doesn't exist today as Merchant Link; it exists as Shift Forward, but it was a great breeding ground for real talent like you.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you for saying that. I also resonate with what you're talking about in terms of emotional intelligence. It's so crazy because that's like one of the skills that I have continuously worked on throughout my career. And the higher and higher I got, the more I realized that there was less emotional intelligence at the top than there was sometimes towards the bottom of the funnel, right? I remember, I won't call out the name of the specific leader, but this leader would curse at all of us. I can't believe you effing did that. Why would you shouting to people on a call where there's a whole team? And I'm like, how can this be productive? How is this even allowed or embraced? It shows a lot about the culture, the leaders that you bring. And that's why, with today's episode being good people make great teams, it's so true because when you are a leader that is using intimidation and authority, you don't empower people to be the best at what they're doing. You are making them fear any mistake, any potential thing that they say or do could be a poor reflection of them. People don't want that. People want to know that what they're doing is good. And if it's not, then give some constructive feedback. I know like you view emotional intelligence as something that's essential for longevity and loyalty and building teams. Feel free to expand more on that.
Yeah. So, you know what we described, you described really well there is the fact that there are mistakes and everybody is going to make a mistake. Every group is going to make a mistake. Every leader is going to make a mistake. And the real question isn't the mistakes that we're going to make. The question is, how do you get out of them? It's really important that, first of all, you have to acknowledge we've made a mistake. And mistakes are never made by one person. They're made by a group. So we share the responsibility of a mistake. Then the next question is, how do we recover? That's when we say, we're all responsible. Let's all come up with a solution and agree on it. There are times where some leaders actually feel that they are the ones to make that call. You've heard the expression, it's above my pay grade. That's like everybody deferring to that guy above. Well, he'll make the call, but that's not the way it should go. The way it should go is that everybody should influence the response and everyone should actually be listened to and then acknowledged and say, okay, the best part of my job is to watch two of my guys actually duke it out because they all come up with really good arguments. But all they want to hear at the end is that they've been heard. I finally sit in and say, I loved your argument just a little better than that one. That's the way we're going. They love the fact a decision was made. So people want to be part of a team which is high performance, and they want to know that they are equals. If you ask any engineer, how does he want to work? Is pay the most important thing? And they'll go, oh, it's important, but it's not the most important. Is the job you're working on important? Absolutely. What you're working on really makes a huge difference. They want to work on the best. But then the other one, which is super, super is important. Do you like working with the guys you work with? And they want to know they're working with the best and brightest. One of my favorite, the most important feelings I have is to be the dumbest guy in the room. You walk in a room where you're the dumbest, it's like if you want to play tennis, you don't want to play tennis and be the best guy in the court. After a while, it gets dull and boring. Get to the bottom run. Because what that does is it pushes you harder. And if you can keep up, that team becomes astounding.
You know this all too well because I know you've worn many hats, right? You've been an engineer, you've been a CEO, you're a founder, like you have experienced it all. I think it's important that people know that this is not necessarily just coming because it's a response from people that you've worked with, but you've been in that position yourself. What would you say were some pivotal moments that really shaped your journey as a leader?
Think you're right. Doing it all is really important. There was a lot of different points that you suddenly wake up to reality. I think one of them was when you're very young, you think you could do everything yourself. You consider yourself a superstar and you try to do everything. And you realize in the end that it's better to have 9 people that are 80% as good to you as to have you, which is 100% good at one thing. It's the team is more important than the individual. And you might be really good at something, but you're never going to be the best. That's a really important decision. A lot of entrepreneurs don't make until later, after their first or second failure. The other thing I learned is that money is not cheap. If you are going out there saying, "Oh, I'm going to raise some money and I'm going to raise money from these investors," and there's no two term sheets which are the same. If you were really, really smart, you start to read between the lines and you don't take them as well, this is the only term sheet you're ever going to get. That's not true. Everybody makes modifications on them, but you learn quickly that term sheets are not designed by you, and you suddenly realize what double dip and all the dilutive preferences are and everything like that. When you're an engineer, you don't know anything about them. So what suddenly you wake up and you get screwed or whatever, not screwed, but you actually have to learn stuff which is way beyond your scope. I would say some of the stark realities of it all is understanding that there's so much out there that we don't know that we have to actually learn. And it's so important.
Yeah, I agree. And that's part of, why this podcast is so important. People get to hear different perspectives and insights from leaders that come across different generations, backgrounds, cultures, experiences. It's another way to learn, but also to relate and think about things differently than you have in the past. I appreciate you sharing. Another thing I found really fascinating was when you moved to the petroleum field and you started working on the media screens at the gas pumps. I want you to share that story because it's fueled by innovation and technology and what your team was able to produce.
Yeah. So as you know, as you move from one company to the other, you're actually bound by non-compete clauses and all these issues. What you have to do is every generation of startup is radically different than the one before. At one point, we developed the world's best passport reader. Like that's one thing. We developed a chip with Samsung. We worked on network routers. When I was with you, we were working on payment, the gateways. The one after that, I went into the petroleum industry, which is something that would definitely be a non-compete, would not apply. In the process of going to the petroleum industry, I said, well, I know payments. Maybe I'm going to work on the revolutionizing of payments at the pump with chip cards and all that stuff. But it became apparent that's not what the industry was looking for. They were just looking for the ability to manage those screens where drivers drive up to a pump and you sit there and you watch either a boring video or the same one over and over again, or you watch nothing. We suddenly realized, you know what? The real money in this industry is not in payments. It's to manage that freaking screen. What we did was we said, well, how hard can it be? But then we realized it was hard because the fact is those screens were actually there for decades. They're probably from the 1990s and the early 2000s. And the technology is so old that the people who actually wrote that stuff are long dead. So what we had to do is we had to do a lot of reverse engineering, trying to understand it, working with some of the manufacturers. And they don't even have complete specifications. You realize they have errors in their documentation. But with a lot of perseverance, we were able to actually reverse engineer it all, get it to the point we could actually manage it from the cloud. And we did all this really cool stuff. And then we could put up anything. And we get to put it to the point where a guy drives up, we see the card he uses, we see his name, we see all the past purchases that guy made. There's even cameras that are up on the top that you can see things about the car. You can actually see scan the environment to see what kind of phone he has. Like he might have an iPhone 13 or 15 or an Android. And you can say, with all that information, I can profile a concept of what he should see on the screen. That is what really was exciting. And that's what we actually did to grow the company. That was the pivot you're talking about. The pivot was we had one direction and we realized, and we were smart because we realized the direction we were going was leading to failure. So you had to pivot to something that they did want.
Yeah, it reminds me of like, I'll be at the dinner table with my husband and we'll be talking about how we need something. I don't know, I'll throw it out there. Maybe he needs a new pair of socks. He'll be like, oh, I've been really wanting a new pair of Dolphin socks. The Dolphins are his favorite football team. And then all of a sudden, in like an hour, he's seeing Dolphin socks, scrolling through Instagram or whatever app he's on. Oh my gosh, are our phones listening to us? How do they know what we're talking about? Why is this all of a sudden coming up? What is that about?
Well, okay, what you just described is what we call a fine line between convenience and creepy. There's a very, very fine line. The Europeans have done a really good job. They have a GDPR, which is basically privacy rules, right? In North America, the privacy rules, except for California, are not quite there. Today, we live in the world of big data. And I would say going back even 5 years ago, I didn't realize how big data can be. But today, data is huge. I remember back in the old days, we would be lucky to be able to get like 100 megabytes of data. As I was just finishing off my last job, we were at 1.5 terabytes per month, going to 2 terabytes a month of data. This is orthogonal data, which means that I'm learning a little bit here about this, a little bit about that. And you get to the point where you have so much data and you have so much compute power now with the cloud that you can start to do analytics with obviously AI tools and machine learning, which is, by the way, they're very different things, but machine learning is the big one and AI is the one which is a little even creepier because even the smart guys don't really know how LLM, large language models, actually work. In the end, it starts to notice things. And when it does notice the things, you can actually become either creepy or convenient. In your case, it actually heard something, was able to identify something that could be really convenient to you. You got the socks you're looking for, but you
Yeah.
get scared the hell out of it because you go, what is it listening to me on everything I'm doing?
Yeah. Well, in fact, there is a lawsuit that just went out with Apple and how Siri was like listening into conversations. And technology is very exciting. And at the same time, to your point, it can be a little creepy sometimes. What are some trends that we can expect to see or are already seeing when it comes to data and technology?
Yeah, that's a good question looking forward because what we anticipated in the past is no longer the norm. The norm in the past was a day would consist of a standard linear approach. There's things thrown at you by technology which actually are manipulating you to do different things. Like if you look at coupons will change your behavior. And that was just the beginning, right? Now what happens is that in the world of the future, there'll be billboards that'll come and change your behavior. You'll just see it in a glance and you'll say, oh, I always wanted that. So the whole concept of the future in technology is how to manipulate your behavior. First of all, to spend more and to actually spend more on this. I think what we've come to the point, and we've seen it even with social media, is that uh, you're not too sure what right and wrong is anymore because there's just so many factors get thrown at you. And I believe that there'll just be a lot more of that before there's stability in it all. But we're going through the period of the next 4 or 5 years where there will be even more media content thrown at you from different directions that you never anticipated before.
Yeah. Do you encourage your team to stay abreast to those trends and things that are happening?
Yeah, well, going back to AI, you asked how is, like that's a big thing. It used to be that I had the best coders, right? Like really, really good coders. But today, a mediocre coder with AI can be a good coder. And what you try to do is you try to get the best coders with AI to be even better. You got to get a tenfold increase. Guys used to write code a lot. Now what they do is they actually define the problem and they pass it over to AI. AI does the coding and we review it. So the speed of coding has just accelerated, and the speed of taking on tasks, which used to be like large teams, has now shrunk to smaller teams. We want to be that smaller, super powerful team. It's like military warfare. If you look at the time of Napoleon, he had 10,000 men facing 10,000 men. Now, if you look at the U.S. Army, they have like a small team of 5 or 6 guys, which are like an entire army. They could take out an entire Napoleonic army. So the power gets in the fewer hands with more and more powerful tools.
Your team is using AI in the right way. They're building the strategy, they're coming up with the problem and what the solution is, but they're having the AI do whatever requires the manpower, right? The hours it takes to code and all of that. Tell me about your team because these are a team of folks that you've worked with for a while, right? They've come across different projects with you.
I like the guys I work with. They're really fun and they're all quirky, in their own different ways, but I respect them. One of the things is that strong people like to work with strong people. And so we do bring in new people into the group, but we always have a plan where we bring somebody in and the team assesses them. They actually are the ones that make a call. It takes about a 6-month window to get somebody to ramp up. But what you look for is you look for the learning curve. You want the learning curve to be exponential up and then it'll actually plateau at some point. It does with everybody, right? But the question is, when does it start to plateau? It's really important that no one knows everything when they come in, especially a junior, right? So what you do is you bring in somebody who has the attitude and they want to know. The questioning attitude that they're saying, how does this work? How does that work? And as they start to work through it, you can see them learning. Then when they get to the point where they're keeping on going, you want to teach them more and more, like you were, Amanda, because you kept wanting to learn. Once they plateau out really early, if they plateau out early, in 6 months, they're at the door. We move them out of the team. We bring in the next one. So over time, what happens is I have actually achieved really amazing teams. Just that one simple philosophy: pick the best, keep the best.
I love that. And I'm curious too, have you had people come from different environments to be on your team? So, for example, maybe they are used to working in corporate America and they come and they work with you on more of the entrepreneurship type ventures.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're like in high school and you're trying to pick your career and you say, well, I want to be a furniture salesman, it doesn't mean you're not capable of being a software developer. It just means you pick that development, that career path. And then at some point you're going to change. You want to say, I want to be down there. You still have the same skill set. You can do it. I mean, I'm looking at, we had this one girl. She was actually working at Lazy Boy. and she applied for a job, and she said that she could help us write some marketing stuff. And, quickly we realized this girl's way beyond marketing. She understands what we're actually doing. And so we started saying, well, do you want to actually learn a little bit of networking tools? Sure. And she was right into it. And she kept on learning. And before she knew it, she was our lead tester. She was writing scripts and she was doing all this stuff that you wouldn't even expect a junior engineer to do. Anybody with the right guidance, and as long as they show initiative and intent that they really, really want to learn it, give them the rope. Let them pull the company.
Yeah, I love that, especially right now because of the current job market. People are either one, hesitant to leave where they're currently at because they want some kind of stability. But for the people that are making moves, it's becoming more challenging because the recruiters and the hiring managers want very niche skills. If you don't have Java and this job requires Java, you are not even making it through the first round of interviews. And so it would be nice to see leaders bring back the transferable skills and giving those people an opportunity to step into this role and ramp up quickly too. They can't afford to waste any time. They need somebody that's going to come into this role and know exactly what they're doing. There are people that have the drive and the knowledge to do that. But if they're not even given a chance in the interview process, it makes the pipeline less diverse because you're probably targeting a very specific audience. I really love that you have embraced people that bring different skills to the table. From what I've noticed is at the executive level, when you want to get into those positions, it pivots from skills to relationships, but the skill part is still there. The more we can open ourselves up to inviting people that bring different backgrounds and experiences, the better off we'll be. Hence the multifaceted executive, right? There's a lot of amazing leaders like you across entrepreneurship and other areas that maybe they'll get pulled into certain things, but there could be opportunities that we're missing out on because we're overlooked.
Exactly. I would agree with you, Amanda. Some of the biggest failures of leadership today is they're actually driven by some core objective for themselves, but they don't realize how the importance is creating the team. The team has to be well-rounded, which is really important. Companies like Google actually did it really well. They actually had challenging questions, which are completely not related to the field at all. And we used them as well. There was a coding assignment that I would do, which had nothing to do with anything else, and showed me how well they coded. A generic question we would ask is, we would say, how many gas stations are there in Texas? You're not allowed to look at the computer. You have to sort of go to the wall and you have to write down your way to do it. And they would write it down. And what you do is you just sort of test them to see how do their mind think. And if you can find somebody who can do it 3 different ways, that's the person you want to hire. You don't have to get the answer right. All you got to do is find how their mind thinks, because that's the person you want.
Yeah. And I mean, you are proof of, leading elite teams. And you've been honest with us about what has worked for, you and the leaders that you've worked with and what hasn't worked. Would you say that there's maybe one or more misconceptions that you could break about leadership, especially at the executive level?
Leaders don't deserve the money they get. They really don't. It's not the leaders that made all the great stuff. It's the people below them. So why is a leader worth like 10,000 times more than the most junior employee? It's not true. What leaders should do is should share the wealth. And that's one of the things I always did, is that when I had a great team, I don't think I ever was the highest paid guy on my team. There was always somebody paid more than me. A good leader always fights for their people, even if it means they make more, because money isn't the reason you're with them. You're with them because they make you look good. They actually produce the best things around, and a good leader should recognize that.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. I think that's also partly what's led to the gender equality gap that we see out there, even beyond gender, right? How is one executive making $500,000 a year while another executive doing similar work and has similar experience making half or less of that? It's crazy.
Make much sense, does it? I
No,
agree.
it doesn't. Well, it's been great to catch up with you, Deepak. I'm so glad that we've stayed in touch. We've started talking more recently, but I love that we've stayed engaged with each other through LinkedIn and beyond. And I want to give you an opportunity to share if there's any key takeaway you want to leave the audience with, please do so.
I think what happens in life is that you actually have to get to know the people that you're working with because they're the biggest source of strength that you're ever going to have. You know, most people are going to run into are by accident or by a quirk of fate, like me running into you. And it's just so neat with all the new modern tools like LinkedIn, just staying in touch with them. And you'd be surprised how they remember you. So reach out to some of them sometime because one little moment in time could make a big difference in your future.
Yeah, I love that. Your story is a reminder of the courage and care that it takes to make great teams, and that's why you're a good person. Thank you for being so open and sharing all your insights with us. How can the audience connect with you from here?
Well, my email is always the easiest way to talk to me. My email is my name, deepak.wanner@gmail.com. Nice and simple.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Deepak. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks again for listening to the Multifaceted Executive Podcast, where each episode reminds us that leadership looks different from every seat at the table. Cheers.